pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have a couple of district announcements. Troy's elementary schools are celebrating Read Across America Week this week with various Dr. Seuss themed reading activities, including school-wide reading chains, drop everything and read sessions, virtual guest readers, and more. Troy City Schools celebrated Black History Month during the month of February with various activities. Examples include Troy High and Troy Middle School welcoming various virtual speakers that tied to history lessons directly to Troy. Interactive bulletin boards at School 14 and School 2 focusing on the Great Migration in each grade level. Good stuff going on.
Thank you.
Next we'll have Mrs. Schweizer with the January financials.
Thank you. We are looking at January financials. The budget transfers were minimal. We had $2.8 million in claims this month, and I want to point out that there were only 5 issues, which we've been working really hard to clean up that procedure, so that is good for us. The general fund, we are projecting a small surplus of about $800,000, and we will continue to look at that closer in the next few months. School lunch looks a little skewed because the revenues were being held, but we have started to receive, actually yesterday we got November, December, and January payments, so those will look better in the next month. Special aid, everything has been approved and we've started to get our back payments, and all bank accounts have been reconciled.
Great, thank you. So it's just a little lag in those.
Yep.
I mean, that's not, it happens.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions, comments? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we'll have Mr. Hoteling with a capital project update.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody and everybody out on the virtual Google Meet. We haven't presented to the board, I think, since November of 2019 on capital projects. So it's been a while. There's a lot of information in this presentation, but the planning of our projects still goes on in spite of the pandemic and what's happened over the last year. With us tonight are our capital project team. You've met some of them before and some are new. With us from Mosaic are John Jojo and Kirsten Morcher. For our architects, Mosaic Architects, Jeff West is here from UW Marks, who's our construction management firm. And to my left is Henry Alvarelli, who's the district clerk of the works. So he's a district employee, and he primarily deals with all the logistics that go on in now our 9 buildings and the projects that go on with them, and communications with other employees in terms of how their lives are impacted when construction occurs. And I really want to say, I want to thank everybody. It really takes a huge team on all these projects, not only in the planning, but in the logistics and implementation of these projects. They can go really well or they can go really poorly, and it depends on who's communicating with whom and how well those lines of communication run throughout the organization. And we've done a lot, and a lot of things have been done, I'd say, pretty darn well, relatively speaking, when you look at the list of projects in a couple slides, and that's really due to everybody of this group.
Bobby G.
Oh, and Bobby G. Okay. Bob Garland, who's our Director of Facilities, who obviously also attends a lot of those meetings, but I would definitely say, and he'd probably say, Hank, that Hank is the boots on the ground guy. Our mission statement. Yeah, there you go. And any of those of the capital project team, please feel free to jump in with comments or anything you'd like to add to the presentation. So we always start, even the other presentations in the past for capital projects, with our mission statement. I've said it before, provide a strong educational and social foundation to graduate students, college and career ready. Facilities is a critical part of that, sometimes overlooked, but a clean, safe facility that can operate and provide a place for students to learn and teachers to teach is just so critical to every day. Part of this presentation is a recap, since we haven't been here in a year and a half, kind of a refresher, if you're not doing it every day, what is going on with the capital projects in Troy. So I'll bring you back to 2015. We had a building condition survey. Those were required every 5 years, or they are, I should say. Under the old rules, we would have had another one in 2020, then the state changed how they're done, so we're going to be having one this year instead in 2021. With that building condition survey, every building is reviewed and items that need to be corrected or replaced are identified. At the time, that's 6 years ago, over $50 million were identified in critical needs. The board had a very lengthy discussion. We went out with a capital project at the time of $23.3 million. The largest part of that project was the high school heating system. That was almost half of that project was that, if not a little more. We replaced a bunch of elementary roofs that were end of life and leaking. We replaced all the windows at school too. We did all the elementary playgrounds. Part of that project in the planning was the School 18 HVAC system, but that was not done. This project ran over budget, and I'd say primarily that was due to the high school HVAC system. That was a high pressure steam system, and every pipe in the place was replaced, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
So that was really invasive, really time consuming, and definitely cost a lot of money. But there's a great return on that. We don't have high pressure steam anymore. We didn't have to have 24/7 coverage throughout the district for that system, and now we're definitely more efficient in terms of heat and energy use at that building. At the time, we also had extensive discussion about School 16's ADA compliance issues there. We also talked about all the pool areas in the district that were closed down and how those may be repurposed. At the time, the board also established a capital reserve along with the voters, $4.5 million, which was used for future improvements, which we've utilized. And then just last year, the voters and the board approved a $56 million modernization plan, which is primarily the focus of this presentation. I won't read every bullet here for you, but we've done a whole lot of work since, this goes back to 2013, so that's going back a little bit, but every year we've done projects. And when we hired Mr. Albarelli, I said, Hank, you know, maybe it's some summer work, you know, this wasn't a trick. It wasn't a trick. He loves it here, and there's a lot of great work going on. I mean, part of the reason he's here almost every day, if not every day, you know, 2 of those projects were emergency projects. If you recall, the high school pool ceiling failed. Thankfully, no one was hurt, and it was found prior to any serious injury or anything of that nature. And then we also had the high school gym roofs that had major leaks. That was an emergency project. So there was a lot of projects due to long-term kind of putting off projects that came to fruition, and we've been kind of going from project to project over the last few years. But there's a whole lot. School 2 Community Schools Wing was in there as well. That was a grant that was issued kind of to our surprise, and we utilized it for a capital project for the Community Schools Wing. And then we also do some $100,000 projects annually, which the state allows you to do a $100,000 cash project, and you get the aid right in the following year. And we've been trying to do those every year to fix up minor projects that are needed. So back in December of 2019, we voted for the large building modernization plan. Those were to address primarily those building condition survey immediate needs. Again, School 18's HVAC. We also included in some of these projects secure vestibules in our buildings. As many of you know, when you enter the building, you enter right into the building. There's no secure screening prior to visitors entry. And so we'd like to, we're addressing a lot of those in this project. School 16, again, ADA non-compliance. We also had the high school tech wing. If you recall, we went to replace the roof on the tech wing, and there was a structural issue with the decking of the tech wing, and so we had to do a temporary fix, and we talked to the board about replacing that wing, or renovating fully that wing. It's the 1950 or 52, circa 1952 technology wing, and we'd like to bring it up to the 21st century STEAM era. I've got to give a lot of credit to Greg Hansen and his group of technology teachers who have been helping with the design, thinking about the curriculum that's going to be implemented going forward, but that's a big part of this project, including the bridge renovation as well at the high school. We purchased a new building, which not many schools do very often. That was the Neff Center, which was owned by Russell Sage. That was going to be renovated, or is going to be renovated into what's called the Troy Community School, which will be the new ALP site. School 14, we're adding classroom walls. I've got a rendering later, which I think looks great, and actually some of the people at School 14, if they're watching, haven't even seen it yet, so it's hot off the press for you guys to see. A secure vestibule is there as well, and renovating the pool area for facilities to relocate, a portion of facilities to relocate there. Carroll Hill, we're actively doing work there now. There we were going to do a full window replacement, and Hank, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, said, why don't we take a window apart and see what we're dealing with? And we did, and found that the windows themselves didn't need full replacing, but just the glass, am I correct?
Glass and the balancers.
The glass and the balancers. So the frame was completely in good shape. We were not going to really upgrade from getting all new windows, and that saved us a significant amount of money, which will be reused, I'm sure, in other portions of this project, but it was really a pleasant surprise, and those windows are all reglazed and done at this point in time at Carroll Hill, with the exception of the courtyard windows, which will be replaced over the summer. We're also replacing all the HVAC units over there. There's a lot going on in this project. School 12, secure entry, renovating the pool area for pupil services to go in there as well. So there's a whole lot. It's going to be very busy. What's the construction plan? I won't read everything. At the Neff Center, we're adding a second story to provide classroom space. School 12 is going to serve as swing space for School 18 and School 16. The tech wing will be fully renovated, and Buildings and Grounds will move to School 14's renovated pool area. And again, School 14 is the wall construction and safety improvements. School 18 will have a new cafeteria. If you know, School 18 doesn't have a cafeteria, it's the gym. So that'll provide for additional scheduling, and there's some additional space area when the pool area gets renovated. That is a tight building. There's not a lot of space. I'm sure Ginny will confirm that. School 16 is a big project to actually move where the floors are in that building. So the center of the building will be demolished and rebuilt, so that way we don't have 4 tiers in that building, because it's very difficult to make it ADA compliant with an elevator. So those of you may remember that those meetings for School 16. And also electrical upgrades in that building, as it is very old. Timeline, when is this all going to happen? Usually that's my first question that people ask me. Tell me when it's going to happen. Phase 1 we are currently in, and that goes right through the summer. That'll be Carroll Hill, again the windows and the HVAC this summer. Phase 2, May 21, which is only a couple months away, to September, our school opening of 2022. The Troy Community School will be completed during that time. School 14's classroom walls and pool area will be done. The classroom walls will be done over the course of 2 summers. So that'll be this summer and then next summer. Half of the building will be done in one summer, and then another half will be in the next summer.
By floor or by?
No, it's by side, so like south side and north side. I can't recall which one.
It's the plumbing issue that we have
Oh,
to say.
yeah, so the plumbing runs vertically through the walls on the floors, so we were thinking about doing one floor at a time, but it's not feasible. Let's see here, and then the School 12 pool area is going to start shortly as well. That'll be done over the course of the next year, and then pupil services, which is Donna Fitz and her group, actually transportation and central registration as well will move to that area. In phase 3, that'll be summer of 22, and that whole school year will be school 18. HVAC system, which was fully designed even previous to this project. Remember, that was in that old $23.3 million project. School 18 will be temporarily at School 12 for 1 year after the AOP moves out. During that school year, the tech wing will also be renovated for the 21st Century STEAM wing. Then the final phase is phase 4, which is 23-24 school year. School 16 will then go down to School 12 temporarily as we renovate that building. We're going to need a lot of people to be flexible during this time. Moves of multiple buildings is going to be hectic. It's going to be crunched in a timeline. We've done it before. Troy has done it before, so you know, we'll be ready. We've got our plans in place, and we'll be visiting with faculty well before that time that they need to move. Are there any questions on the timeline before I go forward? That hasn't changed from the original plan, so that plan is still in place. Some fun stuff, less words, and the pictures of the renderings, which I love to see when the architects have them done. This is the Troy Community School. Top left is the secure vestibule as you walk into the building. So you have the main office on one side and a secure vestibule on the right-hand side where a monitor will screen folks to come in to the building. In the middle of the right is the lobby rendering of that building as you walk into the building. All brand new, it looks fantastic. And the bottom left is looking out of the main doors and the main office that is there on the right. Where the principal, secretary, and a few other personnel will be. School 14, classroom walls. On the top left is what a classroom is going to look like at School 14, which is dramatically different from what it looks like right now. So they will be fully enclosed, what I would consider real type classrooms, not open clusters, in every room, every classroom. On the middle right is actually in the lobby, looking at the stairwell that you would think leads up to the library. On the right-hand side is a secure vestibule. So right now, visitors walk right into the main lobby and they're in essentially right outside the main office. So the lobby doors will be locked and they'll have to check in with a monitor right there, who will then buzz them in after they've spoken to them.
So when this is done, will every school have that secure vestibule?
I think yes. School 2 does not, I don't believe.
So it still goes right in.
So we have discussed about how that could happen, but that would definitely require another project, but I believe they're the only ones.
Okay.
There are a couple, I mean, that's kind of like School 16, where there's multiple tiers and people are coming in multiple doors.
Yeah.
And so we had to discuss how traffic flows. There is a secure vestibule in the community schools wing, and they do get buzzed in for the community schools wing.
Outside.
Outside, yeah, on the Middleburg side, but the other two do not. And on the bottom left is looking into what I call a cluster lobby. So as you walk out from the classrooms, that's a little gathering area where you queue up the students before you make it into the hallway.
So that's where the common area is right now?
It's the common area,
Oh,
yes.
that's cool. Okay.
And so right now you might see like dips in the floor that are sunken. Those are going to be infilled, I believe. And then there's a seating area if they wanted to bring kids out for either for instruction or what have you. And then there's the corridor right behind that.
Yeah, that's cool.
it's really going to look great. School 12, this is the secure vestibule design. So as you know, you come into School 12, the monitor would be behind those double doors, so you'd walk right up and through the double doors and you're in the building. Those would be locked right here. The monitor would be on the right-hand side, screening people before they get buzzed in. There is some egress of the building, so the left-hand side is the stairs. The right-hand side stairs would be removed, so there would only be stairs on the one-hand side. But you won't be able to get up those stairs. At the top, there's going to be a locked door. So it's not like someone can just come in, take a left, and be wandering throughout the building. So that, I think, is a great upgrade for a very busy building at School 12. Just a reminder of the funding of these projects. I think it's critical to talk about, obviously. We originally estimated 85% state building aid ratio on these projects. Our 1920 aid ratio was 90.3, and we're always usually pretty conservative. Some portions of our project may not be aidable depending on what SED says, and so we're always conservative on that. This year's aid ratio actually went up to 92.4, which is a good thing. It means you get more money back. It doesn't change how we're doing anything, but we should get more aid once these projects are complete. Capital reserve was the $4.5 million. We've used it all, so that's zeroed out. We cannot put any more money into it. It's not a revolving reserve that you can do. Any future reserve, if we're always looking to the future. At least Mr. Carmelo and I talk about it all the time. What's the next thing after this in 2023? We've got 9 buildings. Some of them are pretty old, and so we always want to be planning, not wait for that next emergency to happen. So if we were to, at the end of the year, wanting to put money in a capital reserve, you'd have to have a public vote to do so beforehand.
So we'll talk about that a little bit as we move along in the budget process, but it's probably a good idea. Remember what the purpose of that capital reserve was, and it served us well, is to pay that local share. So there's going to be a slide, well, there was a slide earlier that talked about all the things we've done, and I think we're going to repeat it in a minute, but we did most of those things with no impact to our taxpayers at all. And we do that with that 90+% aid ratio, but also making sure the rest of that, the 10% that's supposed to be a local share, can come from the capital reserve. We did it one time with a transfer to capital, which is a little bit different way you can do it, but the capital reserve way is a way to plan. So we don't have to put any money in it necessarily this year, but in our vote in May, and again we'll talk about it a little later as we move along in the process of the budget, it's not really a budget impact, but I think we should be putting on the ballots in May another capital reserve just so we can start planning for the future, and that if and when we need a project in the future, we can keep our streak going of not impacting our taxpayers.
And you don't have to fund it. It's just allowing a board to fund it. And then at the end of the year, if we have a good year and we put some money into reserves, you have the authority to do so. Right now, you have no authority to do it. So, and that's a voter-given authority. Boards can't just do it unilaterally. So it would have to be established before you could put anything into it. Smart Schools Bond, that's a big part of this project. That was $4.9 million. Our plan has been approved. It was just approved last month. And so that means we can go out to bid for the next phase of this project.
I talked about that a little bit, just for the new board members that might not know. Smart Schools Act was, it's probably 7-8 years ago at this point, right?
Probably 5 or 6.
6.
Yeah.
So that was a New York State separate act that they did for there was some things that had to be targeted for. It was mainly technology. That's why it's called Smart Schools, but it also had some safety in there. And so some schools right away that first year went and bought Chromebooks and desktops and things like that with that money, which was fine. But when you buy those kinds of things with that money, you have a recurring cost when those come due again, that money's gone. But I mean, people did it and it's worked out for them. So we've been waiting to try to, pick the right spot for it. And again, going back to what I just said, trying to make sure we had no impact on our taxpayers. We combined, you know, some of the capital reserve that we had with the aid we're getting, and this was a different funding source using that Smart Schools Act for a portion of this 4.9 million, I think it was, can come out of that. And we finally got it approved. That was just last week, right? We got that
Yeah.
approved.
A part of the discussion on this was also paying off retiring debt or old projects. So, you know, as they come off of your essentially mortgage that the district is paying and the state gives you aid, you know, as those go down, you can have a new project but not increase the tax levy from what it is that year. So that's important to kind of look at your debt and say, okay, you know, what can I afford now to a certain extent.
And that's part of the planning ahead that we do all the time. And we saw there was a date coming up that was going to fall off
Right.
considerably. And, then it's a budget impact when it keeps going up and down drastically. So this kind of levels that out for us.
And so at the bottom of the slide, I kind of wanted to bring it all home to everybody and realize that whole list of projects since the $8.4 million IT project in 2013, you know, Troy will have spent, or approved projects, I would say Troy has spent $95 million in the past decade, which is a lot of investment in our facilities. But the better part is that 85 million of it came from building aid and grants like the Smart Schools Bond Act, so, and the Community Schools Grant and items like that. So that's a whole lot of money coming into Troy to invest in our facilities and our buildings, and for our students that you know, otherwise wouldn't be done without, you know, going forth with these projects.
And I think that goes back to the very first thing I said with the mission statement, right? Having a great facility, I mean, this room is a perfect example of it. You know, as people come into our buildings and see, and as all this new project happens, as people get into those buildings, and are gonna, you saw, you know, the pictures that were just there, the renderings, it's just, it's a place, a source of pride for the students, a source of pride for the staff, and for all of us in this room. So it's really been a great investment over the past decade. And again, we've made great use of the state rules and the grant funding rules to get the most bang for our buck as well.
So with that, I know there's a lot of information there. If the board has any questions or any of the board members virtually. And also, if any of the architects or Jeff or Hank or Bob want to say anything, you know, feel free.
With the building conditions survey that's coming out for 21, will that have an impact, like on, will it be done soon enough for us to like look at it to do, to talk about capital reserve for items in that?
I don't know. It probably won't be done that soon. It'll probably be towards later part of the year. You know, that helps. But you could do, you know, a smaller one in May or whatever you think is reasonable. And then, but once we get that building condition survey, it's important for that to help drive the next decision, whether that's the following May or not, you know. But again, a reserve is not, you know, set in stone that you're going to spend it or even save that money. It just gives you the authority just to put it aside. But there's very strict rules on that.
Even though we have plans and we're going to be doing renovations to these buildings, we still have to do that survey?
Yes, it's required. You know, the architects are the primary group doing that, so I'm sure they'll take it into account, and they can speak for themselves if they like, take that into account, knowing what's already going to be updated and so forth. But it's important to know what you've got going on. And then we'll do it again in 2026, which will be just a few short years after this project is completed.
Kirsten, you're on there. It's a good question that Mr. Mayo's asking. As you're doing the building condition survey this spring, and you, like, let's say you're in school 16 and you're seeing the issues at school 16, but you know that we're addressing them in the year 23, 24, they'll be completed. Do you take that into account when you're doing your building condition survey, or you still list the items?
The building condition survey is a snapshot in time, so you're really trying to capture the conditions is when you're doing the survey itself. Now, certainly, there's opportunity then to say that a project is being planned and is forthcoming. We also know that we've done the building condition surveys in the past and that it was not possible to address all the conditions that were identified previously. So some of that work rolls forward, but that's something to address as we come along. It had been that every school district in the entire state was on the same cycle. So the state has now decided to spread them out so that not every school is doing all this work at the same time. So Troy's turn is this year. We certainly can start that survey and gather that information together. The forms have changed a little bit this year, so we have to wait until the forms are officially available before we do an official submittal of that. But we can start to gather that information that we anticipate will be needed for the
So you have
BCA.
to do every building, but we've been in the buildings a lot. So I don't think it's going to be a surprise to us what, needs to get done in the next go-round. I mean, the last time, there were major issues, especially at the high school heating system, and so those
We
were
ended up
kind
making 3 tiers, right, because there was so much?
yeah, there was a lot, and, minus the middle school, there wasn't a large project before that. I have to go back and look, it was quite a long time. So a lot of things were end of life, and we've been chipping away, and so we'll know what we need to get done. I wouldn't be surprised if there'll be a lot of items on the high school, which minus the tech wing, they get, we'll have some items, older building. Even at that time, this building will be 15 years old in the next, after this project is over. So time flies.
2013?
Well, yeah, it was, opening day.
Yeah. Also with the BCS, do you take into consideration when you're doing the surveys that, not necessarily the condition, but the upgrading of technology, would that be in the building condition survey? I mean, because there's not gonna be anything wrong with some things, it's just gonna need to be updated and upgraded to stay with the times.
I don't believe there's a technology component. Kirsten, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we do have a director of technology who has a
Always asking for upgrades?
has a 40-year replacement plan, I swear. And
But can we take that into consideration?
I mean, you can definitely take it into consideration if it's a part of a project and it's like a network, like the network system and items like that. That usually is part and parcel of a building project. But definitely those lifespans of the technology is pretty short.
Yeah. Okay.
The BCS questions are fairly, have been fairly, I'll say, generic, and they're specific categories they're looking at. There might be some questions on the new form about technology infrastructure that's actually built in, but it's a pretty, I'll say, minor part of the questionnaire itself. It doesn't get into detail in terms of the technology and the equipment that's in the building. And it doesn't get into the program in the building either. The fact that your high school tech wing classrooms were set up for 1950 era teaching, that was not captured as part of the building conditions survey in terms of the program. The fact that the way you deliver education is completely different now, that unfortunately is not part of the building conditions survey. The building conditions survey just is about the physical condition of the building itself, and not necessarily about whether the building is set up to teach in a modern way.
So those things come from our internal reviews.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the two need to get married together to sort of identify what priorities need to be addressed, what the district chooses to address to keep the buildings functioning, and from a physical standpoint and from an educational standpoint.
As long as we don't end up like we did in 2010 with buildings falling down and everything, so it's great that we're staying on.
Right.
That
Right.
we're keeping everything rolling.
And so, really, that's so critical, and with 9 buildings, you just can't go a decade without touching one of them. You know, it's really almost a never-ending job. Sorry, Hank.
Couple days a week.
But we've bitten off a lot of it, you know, in my time here, for sure. I mean, tens of millions of dollars is what's going to happen when this is all over. So, you know, we just, and we know we're so highly dependent on state aid, and when there are those downtimes, you can't just say, well, we've got no money, so you can't do anything. You know, if you're getting 90% aid back, you've got to at least try to put a little bit aside, because you can't have the issues that we had. I mean, you don't want to be there. It just ends up costing you too much in the long run. So we've just got to keep it up and continue the conversation and plan for the next phase while you can. Don't wait until you can't plan for it. Any other questions?
Thank you, that was very informative presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie, thank you. I want to make sure I get to the next slide, because some of you may have noticed that a person is missing tonight, and that's Mike Fanning. And he's, you know, our prime architect, I don't know if that's the right term, for how long here in Troy. And Mike has retired, and he's fully retired. He was kind of partially retired. And he told us that a couple weeks ago, that he was finally done, and he was at our last meeting, and we want to wish him the best in his retirement. And a lot of these projects couldn't have been done without him and his partnership. And you know, he's a real professional and a real gentleman, and he was great to work with. And so we want to wish him the best and thank him for everything he's done here.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we want to welcome John Jojo to our crew as well. So thank you, John. Welcome. Good luck, Michael.
Thank you very much for your very kind words there. I'll make sure that if Mike is not here, then he does hear your comments. Thank you so much.
Okay. And that's really it, and we'll be probably awarding bids shortly in the next probably 60 days or so, and hitting the ground running for that phase 2.
Great job, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to action items. Superintendent recommendations, human resources, classified, motion for consent agenda items 1 through 8.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Superintendent recommendations, human resources, staff matter, classified items. Motion for consent agenda items 1 through 4.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Superintendent recommendations, programs, motion for consent agenda items 1 and 2.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Future meetings, our next meeting will be March 17th at 6 o'clock here at the middle school for budget discussion number 1.
Discussion
Two.
draft one.
Draft 1. So draft 1. And then April 14th will be at 6:30 here at the middle school, and that will be what?
Call that draft 2. If you want to keep it budget discussions, then it's 2 and 3. It's up to you.
Those are going to be drafts.
Yeah, it'll be draft 1.
All right, so let's change it to draft 1 on March 17th, and then draft 2 on April 14th.
Correct.
Okay. And then again, April 20th at 6 o'clock here at the middle school. Does anyone have anything before we make a motion to adjourn?
Well, I do, I really do. I got a feedback from one of the teachers, from someone that did Read Across America at School 16. It was a 3rd grade class, and a shout out to Lindsay Lutz, she's our teacher third grade teacher at School 16, and how engaged her students were, and just great positive feedback. And it was from the reader was a 33-year veteran of teaching. So coming from a teacher, she said it was just a wonderful event for her, and she wants to be invited again. So,
Oh, that's nice.
yeah.
Great.
That's nice.
Thank you. Anyone else?
No.
Poor Ann.
Thank you, Ann.
Ann, you want to hang out for a little while here?
No, I'm just so tired.
Do you miss us, Ann?
Just tired.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you,
great
everybody.
night.
Yeah.
Aye.